6 feet or something, but the mic would drop off if I would just move my head.
Come on, Facebook, catch up.
Did they change the interface this week? I like logged out of Facebook and I haven't logged back in.
You know, I don't know.
Because it looks different. Slightly. Huh, maybe not.
I've got some weird malarkey going because I've been testing Chrome Dark, this Chrome Dark extension. Oh, I guess I added an exclusion for this site. Whatever. You know, Facebook has been doing some really weird stuff to me lately. I'm not really sure how to describe it. I engage in my typical Facebook activity, and then I scroll down, and what appears is the same thing that loaded up initially. Like, I'm cycling through maybe 12, 13, 14, maybe 15, less than 24 posts. So I actively go through and remove interests so that I'm not bombarded with all that crap. Then I also actively go through and hide all targeted marketing, because somehow my email addresses keep getting passed around. Fucking email pirates. Bastards.
Yeah, this shit's out of control. Man, and the robocalls are really bad now. That shit is a national security risk, and I think we've gotten to a point where the politicians have pointed at the Russians, but everybody knows our government does this shit. They're the ones that really, I mean, they were doing it against the Russians as far as original propaganda from early 1900s in the Cold War. It wasn't like Russia was the only one doing it. You might have to hit that 5 times. But then what we see is America, whether it's left or right, has to point the finger at Russia for all propaganda, just so it doesn't seem as if our government is enacting social engineering or propaganda on its own citizens, when in reality that they're the ones doing the most of that. Yeah, Russia does some of that shit, of course. I'm not going to sit here and say Russia doesn't do social engineering towards Americans, because of course they do.
Back
But
in the 80s, the comedian Yakov Smirnov's whole thing was, in Soviet Russia, television watches you.
right.
And the reality is, in capitalist America,
Right.
they sell
Facebook watch you, Facebook sell you.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of my earliest, God, it was like an informatics, it was like a 101 class. And and the instructor said something about how if the what you think is the product is free, if the service is free, that means you're the product.
Yeah.
And this didn't actually mean as much to me for another like 4 or 5 years, until this was still when MySpace was just emerging, and so Facebook wasn't even close to being the behemoth that it has become.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone envisioned it becoming what it is.
Well, and I don't know if it was organic and how much of it is actually real, which gets back to this whole social engineering thing.
Yeah.
Because part of it is, if you look at how much Facebook has been used for law enforcement and to monitor people for legal reasons, whether it be jobs or specifically for government I mean, now they're asking visa applicants for social social network profiles, and then acting like as if China's social credit scores are somehow different just because they put a number on it. So yeah, we have effectively our gut. If Facebook was not profitable for 10 years and the government's been using it for law enforcement, what does 2 plus 2 equal?
So 1984 was published in 1949,
Hmm.
and when I was in elementary school, we read it,
Yeah.
and I feel like it was something that was kind of controversial for a while, and but it was
Wasn't
still.
it? Was it banned when we were, or it was?
It was
They
on
were
the. They
discussing
were
it
trying
on.
to
Yeah, I think they
try
were
to
trying
figure
to
out.
ban it.
Well,
Ironically.
yeah. Well, I feel like there were. That was the 90s, I think, by the time that I read that in school, and so that's 40 years where multiple generations of children, young adults, had been exposed to those concepts,
Hmm.
and we had been taught, to be wary of Big Brother,
Yeah.
because that fascist state is just lurking in the shadows, and lo and behold, we hand over our social profile information
Right.
like freely, and then we don't even get the benefit of the marketing.
Nope. No, which gets back to this. I just read an article that was talking about how academia is actually an arm of post-colonial industrialism in the sense that it reinforces a lot of the ideas that are put forth in patriarchy.
I'm pretty sure that Yale and Purdue, not Yale and Princeton, are direct beneficiaries of the opium trade.
Oh, absolutely,
So
absolutely. I mean, and
that's
these.
like
So this, what we're
like
getting at.
massive endowments.
This is why the whole
created by
the
drug
whole
money.
Facebook as the core of American government social engineering is so important as an argument, because what you end up having is so for example, with this recent Nancy Pelosi video of her that was slowed down
Oh,
to
the
70.
deep fake video.
It wasn't even a deep fake.
It wasn't?
No,
It was
they
just
just
edited?
slowed it down
Ugh.
to make her look drunk. So this is where
not even
Facebook would
creative.
not remove the video because they claim, because their standards do not have any onus of responsibility for truth, that they don't have to pull it down. Well, then you also have Facebook, who was banning Alex Jones and other far right.
Facebook just instituted that whole fact check mechanism.
Right. So then you can't have Facebook doing both and being pro-left. What is the real motivation behind this? Because clearly it's not a pro-left leaning if they are letting the image of Nancy Pelosi, or the video of Nancy Pelosi, stay up. So there is an inconsistency
Yeah.
here that people need to really analyze when they're saying, I would almost rather if Facebook had a pro-left leaning that was clear, because then that would mean the intention is not as high-level nefarious as it actually is. Because what this comes down to is Facebook controls sentiment, Facebook controls emotional response, and Facebook controls the social conversation. So it's something that when we were discussing it in terms of America, after a while, Facebook became the go-to point for people for various reasons, whether it be because their friends and family were there, or because that's where they get their quote-unquote most trusted sources of news. This is not accidental. This move of Facebook from being the MySpace replacement to being the place where people go for their news and their social debate, it didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen on accident. So then
Yeah, the internet isn't a vacuum either.
absolutely not. So then when we look back and we see all these other failed Facebook replacements or supplements that people are not going to, what is happening that is causing these things? So media is reinforcing it,
Yeah.
which you didn't have reporters going to Facebook and Twitter before. B, law enforcement is using it heavily. And then C, it becomes part of the conversation in the domain of free speech incorrectly because now it's so heavily used for people's discussions that now people have conflated it with a public space even though it's actually private space.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole misperception of freedom of speech.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and then this gets back to you have a ton of Americans who don't even know their own laws, but then want to use the Second Amendment to assert what they think is their idea of those laws. Just they don't give a shit if they're accurate. They have been told that their opinion on those laws is so important that they don't actually have to learn them correctly in order to use the Second Amendment to then reinforce their perception of everything else.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, it's not. I won't act like those quote unquote Second Amendment people are actually gonna go do it because they're bitches, they're pussies. Like, okay, let me use different words. They're cowards. They're not gonna do anything. That's why they have those fucking weapons in the first place. But what they think is a reason for them to stockpile weapons and actually just enrich the people who are giving them these lines of fear rhetoric to fill the pockets of munitions builders. It's like those people have been made to be unaware of their surroundings by this social engineering that's going on. That's not the Russians. That then America has to say, if we expose Americans to what actually goes on with social engineering, then it's gonna be really hard to keep this Second Amendment bullshit division up. And it's really, it's crazy how many of the things that were being fought about before you and I were born are still being fought about because the people who profit from them are still profiting from them. And it's like they're not gonna stop these bullshit news cycles, even though Facebook didn't exist before we were alive, but people are still using Facebook to argue about abortion and Roe versus Wade and shit like that, or gun rights, or fucking.
What's interesting. I think I read something in a Vox survey or study said something like there are enough firearms in North America for every U.S. citizen to have a firearm.
Yep. But they're disproportionately owned.
It's owned by like 20% of the population. So 20% has consolidated all of the firearms.
Just like any other commodity.
It gets even weirder with alcohol because it's really only like 10% of the population drinks heavily enough to support the liquor industry.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so the rest of us basically are having subsidized booze.
Basically.
if that's your poison, like it's essentially subsidized by other people. And so, in a lot of ways, maybe that's how they look at it. Like the military really subsidizes the R&D, and so they get the benefit of cheaper munitions. That's kind of messed up.
I mean, that's how colonialism works.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly how colonialism works.
So
that's the modus operandi, which is why this gets back to the whole idea of everything that we're being taught via academic structures or economic structures reinforces this colonialist patriarchal system that has a hidden element of pollution or exploitation that is actively hidden on purpose, which is now impossible to hide from because of Facebook. So it becomes this weird thing of what often is the tool of oppression then comes back to undo the oppressor, which is, I think, what's happening with Facebook in terms of, okay, at one point, I think at the peak Facebook, they were saying there was like 2 billion Facebook users, and then they found out a shitload of them were obviously fake.
Yeah.
Same thing's happening with Twitter. It's happening with all these social networks. So
A lot of people have multiple accounts.
well, that
And
too,
then there are
but a
also
lot
all
of them
the
were spam.
zombies and
And
the bot accounts.
The issue is what they were doing is Facebook was actively allowing this to perpetuate on their platform because it's good for their advertising sales if people think those numbers are real. Facebook isn't going to actively debunk their 2 billion users because then that hurts their profitability. So they're going to let that shit go as long as they possibly can.
So recently, in addition to my, normal political outrage spattered with cats and, funny things, what I consider to be jokes, I started sharing some more tabloid level entertainment, like Cannibal, who eats 7 pizza delivery drivers and 6 Chinese food delivery drivers over the course of some period of time, stuff like that. Obviously, this stuff is for entertainment. Obviously, it's not real, because if some dude ate people like that, we would all know.
Right.
That would be some national news, like, holy cat, there's a freaking cannibal serial killer out there.
Mm-hmm.
We would know.
Yeah.
And really, one of my friends pointed out that the writing was actually pretty good. Like, the story behind the fake news was actually pretty entertaining. And that was the point. Like, I started to realize that the internet was making me angry about things that I shouldn't be mad about.
Mm-hmm.
No control. There's nothing to do about it. And there was also this side of the internet that used to exist for me that was pure entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started looking for it, and lo and behold, it's still there.
Oh, of course.
It's just as outrageous. Yeah. It just has to be...
It's obstructed by negativity.
Well, you have to...
It's like noise content is the problem now.
Yeah.
Whether it's on Netflix or fucking the internet in general, there's just too much noise.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to sift through it as like a tuning fork effectively.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get swallowed in the fucking wormhole or the rabbit hole or the pothole, whatever hole.
So here's the thing. The delivery driver Cannibal,
Mm-hmm.
he kind of looked like Bat Boy from back in the day. Like National Enquirer fucking Bat Boy.
Yeah.
Had that kind of like, forehead and eyes, like those beady eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Just, a mature adult version. Just so maybe there's a continuum within tabloids and that level of entertainment that people thought tabloids were real for the longest
Well,
time.
people were really dumb.
Well,
Arthur Conan Doyle thought fairies were real.
yeah, but he also was mixing cocaine and opium or heroin or something.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy he was doing his thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really hard to accept that even now most people are really, really dumb. And I will say myself included, in the sense of, think of it in this way. In 1,000 years, if society has not destroyed itself and all of the libraries stay continuous and all of our science stays progressive, what I know now as an individual is going to seem like some Fred Flintstone type bullshit.
Yeah, and
it's just a matter of...
But then the structures of society haven't changed much since classic Rome.
Right.
And so
that's why we're still fucking stupid.
So no matter how far we actually go, we
still got Caligulas, bro.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. We've never been modern. This gets back to that notion of the iPhone is pseudo-modernity because it gives us the false sense of modernity. Like, because we have access to technology, because we have access to mass production, industrialization, we all think everything is modern, when in fact, yeah, we're basically those Roman fucking idiots.
Being paid in salt.
Yeah.
Oh, salt.
I mean, and I think it's a realization that gives us a lot more room to grow than is a reason to be upset. Because again, it's more so. I was thinking about. Are you familiar with this Tower of Babel story?
Mm-hmm.
So, if we reframe that story in the context of a global attempt to get off planet, they failed.
Yeah.
But we didn't fail. So we've gone beyond the Tower of Babel now as a species. And the problem with that story is if you look at that story in the context of history as if it's meant to be a reason not to unify, that's the wrong lesson to me. And it's a misinterpreted lesson that's meant to be misinterpreted on purpose, put forth by those who have bastardized the teachings of the King James Version is 5 languages separated from the original text. I'll say it like that. And the King James Version has a very
Well, even the Masonic Bible that I have contains information that's not in standard issue
right.
Bible.
Yeah. That's a really cool Bible. But in the just not to get too far off the story of the Tower of Babel in the sense of.
Well, I'm just saying there's no telling how many times the story has changed.
Right, but it's almost not important because we've gone beyond biblical.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for people to realize that or even realize the scale and scope of what that even means.
Yeah.
When we're talking about they tried to build a tower to heaven, the heavens, which is effectively space, because of the way that heaven and Hades or Sheol, or what people commonly now describe as hell, are described in the Bible or ancient texts. It's not as simple as up and down as some fucking stupid people have. Some people really think it's up and down, and that's the craziest. That's the craziest shit right there. When you have people who are still convinced that hell is just somewhere down.
No. I'm pretty sure it's a dimension.
Right. That's what they're
different plane of existence.
That's what they're supposed to be in the text. But getting to that point, the heavens are clearly outer space in the sense of there's heaven which is the Silver City, in the sense of what people identify as the thing with the pearly gates.
Yeah.
The streets of gold or whatever.
Incidentally, my name Tien in Chinese means sky and heaven and celestial, like outer space.
Yeah.
I've always thought that was interesting because, depending on the context, it has all these various meanings.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's also a really common like a vocable sound.
I mean, and even in the Chinese lore of the 7 heavens, in the sense of different layers, or it may even be 12, or I know there's different levels of heaven. That shit happens in Islam.
I think they call it the Dharma realms in Buddhism.
Yeah.
And Taoism, it's I can't remember what it is in Taoism. Taoism is complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it's super complicated. It's got different sets too.
It's like the most complicated version of chess that exists. Yeah. It's Go, a spiritual Go.
Basically.
Taoism's actually really cool. Like the alchemy side of it, and then the whole spirituality of warding off demons and then casting spells so you can have a good harvest of your crops, because you need to prepare enough tea leaves to get you through the winter.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting it's that whole aspect of how alchemy and proto-alchemy were used historically, also in Islam, because they were starting to trade with the Chinese and learn from them. Mm-hmm. This is one of the big things that the West doesn't teach its youth or anybody about other history or at all, really at all, in the sense of this is why it's easy for then ancient aliens to come in and try to usurp and co-opt the history and be like, this is fucking aliens.
Yeah, the whole
These
time
Chinese couldn't have done this. They didn't have time. It was aliens.
Yeah, the whole time that the aliens were building pyramids, the Chinese were sitting there just watching, saying like, guys, what the hell are those flying things?
Yeah, it's like,
Lou, go get your kite, fly up there and see what's going on.
Yeah.
That'd be so awesome.
Yeah, man. It's really because of what you learn in the Bible Belt, especially, but pseudo-Christian America, it's really, it's like a shock to learn about Chinese history because they're trying to act as if this world is 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
Or 10,000 or whatever these idiots fucking think it is, that it's not, when China was like very much an active country. Or not
Well,
a country, but
if
an
group of
empire.
kingdoms.
Yeah.
Well, if Korea has 10,000-year-old poetry, and that written language was essentially developed to as a springboard to teach Chinese, as I understand it, like, holy crap, that's a very that means there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I mean, China exists long before any any physical records that remain now. Because the stuff that we're finding now, that's like at the very threshold of not being able to figure out what it is. That stuff's like 5,000, 6,000 years old, 7,000, 8,000 years old, and a lot of that stuff isn't. It's like they're finding musical instruments. That's an advanced creation. You don't just make, and these are stringed instruments.
Yeah.
There's math involved in there, and there's an understanding of like harmonic structures and intervals and tension and how to balance these physical structures to make them project sound. And so they figured this stuff out a long time ago.
Yeah.
A long, long time ago. Who knows? Like, the instruments that we think of as like Chinese folk instruments today, those things might actually be fairly advanced versions of something else that we have no idea even existed.
Right. No, it's very possible. Even, I mean, in
For
the
all
same
we know,
way
the
that,
lute came from China.
Yeah.
Instead of, from more traditionally, it was considered the oud is like the birthplace of all of that stuff, I think. And that's a Turkish instrument.
Yeah, because there's a, like a 12-foot version of it. That's,
Ouds are crazy. There's all sorts of sizes of them.
yeah.
But they're fretless, and they've got this big old belly-looking thing, that bunch of doubled strings.
Well, because I think the ones that I'm thinking of, the bigger ones, they play more like pianos. And
those are zithers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, they're zithers and all over the place. I'm pretty sure that the zithers are from the Middle East, though. I'm willing to be very wrong about that.
Either there or India. So.
Yeah. There's so many really crazy instruments that come out of like Eastern culture that are so foreign looking, and there's something about them that are kind of familiar. Like sometimes there's like a Eastern instrument that sounds exactly like some Western instrument, and they have like the same range. They're very alien when compared to each other.
There's
like a lot of the reed instruments are like that, where they have like similar sounds, but they have nothing in common physically.
Yeah. There's a one that looks like an actual flying saucer, but it's basically, it's kind of like the steel drum sound from the Caribbean, but it's hollow, so it's.
Oh, I think I know what you're talking about. And they activate it by like touching it and making it resonate.
No, well, they can, but usually they hit it like percussion, but it's also, it's a rhythmic instrument, but it's also tonal.
Oh, cool.
So it's kind of, again, it's a weird instrument in the sense of it looks like a steel drum, or it looks like a UFO,
But it sounds like a steel
but it
drum.
sounds like a steel drum that's a little more, I don't want to say more hollow, but it's got a weird ethereal sound to it, which
there are a lot of bells in like Eastern instruments that I think don't exist in Western instrumentation, that have like completely different tonal profiles,
Yeah.
where they'll have these extra hollow sounds with like extra pronounced ringing or resonant frequencies. And
Well, even I know for a fact that Middle Eastern,
cymbals come out of the Middle East.
well, their music scales have semitones that aren't used in the West.
Yeah, I remember reading
They
about
use,
in Turkish music, there are like some 13-tone and some 17-tone systems, and I wish I could remember the name of the guy. He plays a variation of electric guitar, a fretless electric guitar, and uses a device called an EBow, which creates this magnetic field to cause the string to resonate or vibrate. And so he plays it like a traditional, like an oud, except now it's electrified.
Nice.
It's cool stuff. As far as guitars go, it's like, it sounds like a guitar, it looks like a guitar, but he's playing this. Actually, no, it doesn't sound like a guitar. It looks like a guitar, and he's kind of playing it like a guitar, but it has this extra ethereal sound, and it approaches guitar-like sounds because he's using an instrument and using an amplifier and all of these other devices that are used in the process of bringing the electric guitar to life. But it's so foreign. And this guy's really good. I mean, it sounds real cool. It's like the kind of stuff that when you watch like Aladdin, it's like, as a kid, like that kind of thing that you become entranced by. And I realize that Disney paid a lot of money to some composers to dissect Middle Eastern music and come up with something palatable to Western.
Yeah.
Bless Disney, they've got the best string section. Like, they really do. Those bastards make me cry more than anyone else.
Man. Yeah, it's really interesting to see how they've kind of set the standard for what people think of as big movies. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing, but their strings have definitely kind of, even down to when you go listen to Beverly Hills Cop 3 soundtrack, it's Disney-fied.
You know, when I think of like movies on just a huge scale, I think of guys like Ridley Scott and Stanley Kubrick, but really Ridley Scott and sometimes James Cameron. Although James Cameron I think of mostly for, you know, the time travel continuum of Terminator, but
David Lynch is pretty good too. I started watching Dune again last night.
Oh man,
it was like, that was pretty good, man. For fucking 84, that was a pretty big. I want to say.
Have you seen the Sci-Fi Channel versions of it? Dune and
I think
Children
BBC.
Of Dune? Or yeah, I think it was on. I think I saw it on Sci-Fi. Maybe, I don't know.
I mean, is it the same version?
Yeah, it's like
yeah, this is a good one.
It's more like a screenplay theater type production.
Yeah. Which I thought.
It's actually very authentic to the book in
terms of, it was authentic to the
all
book,
the details,
but as far as what it got to the viewer, I feel like it didn't quite get across what Lynch's. This is where, to me, adaptations have a job to get the spirit rather than to be authentic to the book. And this is where I think David Lynch's film got the spirit more authentic than the one that was more authentic to the book.
I think the reason that I actually agree with you, but I think the reason that worked out that way is because they were really accurately envisioning the details of the book instead of trying to, convey the terror that the Sardaukar unleash, or communicate the sense of unified presence that the Fedaykin have when they're like getting.
That's it, and I think you're spot on as to what happened when I was viewing it, as far as retrospectively, as to why I think the film was better, was because the film, technically it didn't have less time, but it used less time to tell the same story. It had to get the punch across quicker and more direct, in a way that the miniseries was more roundabout and allowed itself to explore the book more accurately, in a way that, as a viewer, I don't think it came across with the same sense of urgency that would be necessary to make you care about the situation.
Yeah, well, I think.
I mean, that's comparatively.
Well, I think that the real big issue is that when it's not serialized, they condense years into into a they use a series of montage to condense years, whereas when they do the stage play version of it and they're trying to be really, let's really channel these characters type thing, and let's get to know these characters. It almost undermines. I mean, the books. When I read Dune when I was in middle school and in high school, I remember just like this fast-paced world where everything was happening, and it's all happening in my mind, of course. And so, there's a lot to be said for a movie or a story interpretation that moves quickly. I think that it's actually, in a lot of ways, I think that's why I still like movies, like big screen movies. That's why I have a lot of hope for, whatever Ridley Scott does with Alien. I have a lot of hope for that because he manages to pack a lot of information into, a couple hours that answers a few questions, but leaves me asking more questions. And I think that's part of a good aspect of storytelling that we're losing. I feel like too many stories hand feed us everything. Like I don't need an origin story for everything. I don't need why anything exists other than here we are in this story. Here's a series of events.
Yeah.
We're gonna follow a few characters and watch them deal with this, as the plot thickens, all that kind of stuff. And that's one version of a story. And we don't necessarily need to. I don't need to know details about the protagonist's, alcoholic uncle, or the antagonist's childhood. None of that's important.
Yeah.
We just know that one of them is the good guy and this other one's the bad guy. One of them's complicated and the other one's even more complicated, and that's fine. We're gonna see how they behave because they're gonna be put in these complex situations where we're gonna see their character, and the character will reveal itself instead of like telegraphing everything.
Yeah.
If I wanted to see everything telegraphed, I would watch Chinese opera and wait for the kung fu fight where they like announce every technique that they do.
Yeah.
I always thought that was funny in old kung fu movies. They'd be like announcing the technique they were about to unleash on their opponent every time.
Yeah.
Morning tiger strikes,
That's
standing
why those
crane.
fights took so long.
Yeah. Mantis distracts with scratching eye. Monkey throws poo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why those fights were so. That's why they took hours, days, even.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to have seen the progression of martial arts scenes, in the sense of now the scenes are so, well, I won't say accurate. They attempt to be real.
They're hyper realistic.
They're hyper realistic, attempting to.
Also, nobody can withstand that kind of a beating.
No,
ever.
no,
Like
no.
physically, we turn to mush way sooner than nobody can get thrown across the street into a building, cause the building to start cracking on its facade, and then get up. Nobody gets up from that shit. Nobody. When the Hulk picks up fucking Loki and swings his ass back and forth over marble and breaks the marble.
I mean, okay.
Loki gets a bruise. Okay, they didn't even show him real bruised up. He should have been completely purple, like completely purple, like puffed up. And Thor would have poked him, and he'd be like, "Oh!" And then Thor would have laughed at him and said, "You got what you deserved, brother. Let's go home." That kind of shit. Nobody's that tough, especially not Tony Stark.
Oh God, no.
A human in a tin can getting tossed around is.
I mean, the tin can...
Inertia.
Right, yeah, exactly. There's no inertial dampeners that were protecting his internal organs. So yeah, that... You can't think too much about it, because... Especially in Iron Man... What was it, Iron Man 2 when he crashed because he was drunk?
Yeah.
Nah, that shit was over, son.
Okay,
that was when the series ended.
So, yeah. Okay. If Tony can survive that... War Machine. Why can't Brody do it?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
That suit should have had as many safety measures inside, airbags or whatever, foam. It should have rebooted on its own.
Yeah.
Because the Iron Man suit would have rebooted.
Not to mention, he was the one that actually went through boot camp and
Yeah.
the fucking military training.
Oh.
So, yeah, if anybody survives that fall or goes through that fall and doesn't get paralyzed, it should have been Rhodey, not Tony. But yeah, we're not gonna hold the company who has a purple antagonist too accountable for their realism.
That's fucking War Machine.
Yeah.
That character has so much. Like, I remember reading. I think it was Ghost Rider, Wolverine, Grey Hulk, and War Machine. Like a new Fantastic Four comic, like miniseries. I think it was War Machine. I just remember thinking it was really awesome seeing like Hulk and Wolverine kicking ass together instead of like fighting each other.
Yeah.
I think pretty sure they fought each other throughout the entire series, but
That's surprising.
I really hope that they do that. I really hope they give us Wolverine and Hulk beating each other around Alaska.
Yeah, there's rumors that Deadpool's gonna be the first one to make an appearance.
That's even better because Deadpool needs to be part of that whole saga, that mini series, because he needs to talk a bunch of shit.
Yeah.
I hope that it's actually a Deadpool movie.
Who was talking about
Because if it's a Deadpool movie, then I mean Ryan Reynolds has done really well with Deadpool, and even though he's faced a lot of brick walls and stone walls and steel walls and border walls and all the walls, the Great Walls. He does a really good job of translating Deadpool, and I think that there is enough. I think that people have been waiting long enough for, especially because he's been egging on Hugh Jackman about Wolverine.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's not Hugh Jackman, people are ready for Wolverine and Deadpool to have to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Because that's everyone who loves Deadpool expects that.
I've heard talks of like Charlie Hanneman, I think the dude's name is.
Huh.
I mean, I don't think that they've signed anybody necessarily, but there's always rumors.
The internet wants Danny DeVito to play old man Logan.
This is the same internet that wanted Endgame to end with fucking Ant-Man and Thanos' ass. Thanos. There's some people who just want to ruin everything. And I'm like, in a different universe, Danny DeVito as Wolverine actually makes sense in some weird way, in the sense of if we're talking about the anime.
I think if we're talking about Danny DeVito reprising any role of any kind of specially powered cartoon character, comic book character, he is the max. He is totally the max.
Yeah, he's totally the max. Yeah, he's
got the right shape for it, like
the right
voice,
mindset.
Right? He's grumpy enough. He's got the voice.
Yeah, that I could totally get behind that one.
Especially watching him punching all those bunnies.
Oh man. Because this is where okay. I love Danny DeVito. I love Danny DeVito. He's a fucking funny motherfucker. When he was on The View, trashed. That shit was fucking hilarious. But don't ruin my movies with Danny DeVito, y'all. Fuck out of here with that shit.
Yeah, no, he's not. He can't be Wolverine.
No,
He's too old.
Because this is where I'm like, okay, I get the joke, but stop, guys. Just stop. Just stop. Because it's like some Hollywood exec will be like, well, let's think about this for a second. There's a petition. And some dumbass is actually going to consider that because some fucking people couldn't stop with the jokes. And I mean, again, obviously, I'm not really saying stop with the jokes. But this is why, at some point, that leave Britney alone dude almost got a fucking TV show is because people don't know when the shit is actual, like, real.
So, years ago, actually, it was right around the time I was taking that informatics class. I became aware of Poe's law, and I mean, I'm pretty sure that it generally applies to religion, but it's essentially, if something seems like, like it's pushing farce or satire, it probably is.
Yeah.
And there's so many things on early YouTube that were that to me rang of just pure entertainment. But I think that because of the whole the illusion of a democratic internet and free communication and a platform where you can speak your ideas however which way you want. Granted, those things do exist, but it's all entertainment. Like when I was trying to figure out how we were going to classify what we do, it's like it could be so many of these categories, but entertainment's the only one that really is a natural umbrella to include everything that we even talk about. And so I think that that's the thing, is that we're at a point where the technology allows so many channels. There are so many channels of content, and it's never ending. Billions and billions and billions of minutes are uploaded every day, and people don't even get to see it all.
Yeah.
Some of it just goes unheard or unseen or whatever, and that's just
Some of it should.
that's the nature of it, though. There's so much
Like,
content.
Most of it should be unseen.
Well, that's
and unheard. I'm assuming.
There's a saying that the cream rises to the top.
Right.
So
yeah.
and that's the nature of entertainment.
Yeah. The nature of anything, really.
Yeah.
It's, 90% of shit is garbage. 10% is good.
Except for cyanobacteria, they pretty much like exist at the lowest points. That's really special, though.
And I don't mean that the top 20 and top 30% of any given thing are trash. It's just not the top 10%.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's the way shit goes. It's a matter of, it's not even about being the top either. It's the reality of this pseudo equality that we've been told, in the sense of everybody doesn't run the same speed, everybody doesn't lift the same amount of weights, everybody doesn't execute martial arts with the same proficiency. There's no such thing as equality in action. That's like a false sense of application of the concept of equality.
Well, that's the whole, like, that's the conundrum of standardized anything.
Yeah. People aren't allowed to be different. Really.
Yeah.
And then this gets back to the idea of what we're being told to try to achieve as a
oh my God!
existence.
Had the Chinese had the internet during the golden age of kung fu, there would be like 10 million styles, and 45% of them would all be the same. And then the remaining ones would be a fighting over which one is actually a legitimate style and not just some derivative of some other style. And there'd still be like,
I mean, and it just got delayed to today.
Yeah.
That's all that happened.
Yeah.
That's all that happened. And which is a great time. This is another reason why it's a great time to be alive, because in the sense of, when you look at the Roman gladiators in the Colosseum, that was just one empire. We have that globally now. This is, again, we're post-biblical in a way that people still haven't grasped. Our martial arts are better than theirs. I don't care what anybody says. Our martial arts are fucking way better than theirs. There's no question. There's no question. Because what happens is, when you have empires isolated, well, the only time they can test their shit is when they're in battle. And that empire has a limited lifespan, and only those martial arts are only going to be tested in battles over the lifespan of the empire. Once that shit's done, it's done.
Well,
but now we have a global fucking, like, not just one, we have multiple global platforms for martial artists to come and test their fucking their skill sets, test their arts. And that shit is constantly happening, to the point where we have sport fighting and we have martial arts for real world fighting, and they don't even necessarily cross over any, like, at this point. I don't know if they ever did, but they definitely don't now, because we've had enough time to articulate sports martial arts versus real world, these strikes will kill you martial arts.
Yeah, like I mean, I know that I see like UFC fighters when they talk about what they train, they're always like, yeah, and there's an element of Krav Maga, and it's like, but I never see it.
Well,
They always end up resolving some like boxing technique or some like.
That's a different one, because Krav Maga is
a combat form.
Yes, but it's more philosophy about ending a fight, which is why you don't see it in a sports fighting.
Well, that makes sense.
You see what I'm saying? In the sense of, so, like, I'll give you an example. Say you were to get attacked in the street, a Krav Maga practitioner would take a weapon, or take anything that they could turn into a weapon, and end that as quickly as possible. They're not going to try to counter it with a technique.
Yeah.
They're going to try to end that person's either in their capacity to attack or in their life, because that's what you're taught to do. This is
combat system. It's
right, and which is why you're not going to see Krav Maga really in the octagon, because again, it's not about Krav Maga moves, but it's an approach to awareness, and its approach to reaction, and its approach to attacking, as to where you do the least amount of movements and the least amount of strikes to put your opponent out. You're not trying to be fancy. It's the least amount of energy, it's the least amount of motion to put them down. You're trying to put them down like a fucking dog. That's why you don't see that shit. When you're getting in the octagon, this person you're fighting is not there because either one of you has to die. It's there exactly. You're there for entertainment. You're both there for entertainment. In the back of your head, you know that person has a family that they have to go fucking home to. So you're not trying to put them down like a dog. It's not the same thing. So this is, in the early days of the UFC, it was, because it was fucking no holds barred, no gloves, no fucking
open class too, right? For a while.
Yeah.
They're like completely mismatched sized fights, and it wasn't always a guarantee who was going to win, because that small dude was.
Which
really
is why
fast.
You end up with Hoist Gracie versus Chemo, with Hoist being, I think he was 185 and Chemo was 265, and Hoist ended up winning because he fucking ripped out Chemo's ponytail. He ripped his hair out, and fucking. That shit was legal.
I don't think you can do that anymore.
Yeah, no, you definitely can't do that anymore.
Eye gouging, punching people in the balls, probably.
Yeah, apparently, don't, like, back in the original UFC, don't walk in there with a fucking ponytail, because that shit will get ripped out, apparently, because that shit was legal. They were knocking people's teeth into the front row in a way that just doesn't happen now.
Yeah, actually, I remember seeing a video of a Golden Gloves boxer. He just kept waylaying this dude. Every time the guy was about to fall down, he just would like uppercut and stand him up.
Yeah.
And he was up against the cage, and the ref just like let it happen.
Yeah.
And it didn't go on for that long, but he stood him up several times. It's one of those like, what the fuck?
Well, you see Incredible. That happen. And that's usually because they don't actually they really don't like each other in real life. Because what would usually happen is, if a person is about to go out and the other person sees it, they're not going to keep standing them up, because they don't want to keep injuring that person. But this dude probably said something about the guy's mom or his girlfriend or his wife or whatever.
Man, whenever I watch boxing,
and he wanted to make sure the dude fucking knew he knew.
Whenever I watch like the really lightweight boxers, like the really lightweight boxers, like flyweight or whatever, the really tiny guys, and there's always one that like talks a lot of shit, and then the fights are over so fast. They're just like, they're so fast.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible, like the flurry of glove and then all of a sudden someone's on the ground. It's like that was only 28 seconds.
Right. Yeah. That's a real fight.
That's a real
That's
fight.
a real
Holy
fight.
crap! And it's not like they're throwing lightweight gloves. They're all using
No.
like full-size boxing gloves.
Yeah. I mean, and not to say that only real fights happen in that setting. Is more so a real fight has gotten so far away from what is happening in these sports settings that I think it's people forget what real fights actually are. Like they don't last long. They last 14. I mean, maybe 15 seconds, maybe 10 seconds. 28 seconds is a really long fight.
Yeah.
That's a really long fight. That's a fight that both people either may know what they're doing or don't know what they're doing. That's the only reason that shit lasted 28 seconds.
Yeah.
That's a really long fight in the real world. And that's not being refereed by somebody. And I think, again, when...
Or it's a brawl and there's like
right.
Like,
I mean,
like
that's
15,
a real fight.
20
That's a
people
real
involved, and then it
but
lasts
here's
for
the thing.
Didn't last for 45 seconds.
It doesn't. It doesn't though. That's what people who haven't been in brawls necessarily don't realize. Brawls they don't last that long.
Yeah.
It's not like the shit you see in the movies. A brawl will break out and be over before that shit. Before anybody even realizes that shit's happening, because fights are so fast, man.
Yeah.
It's so fast.
The one
It's
brawl
so
that
fast.
I've experienced, I was hanging out with a buddy of mine in Kokomo, some rave buddy, and he had some other friends from Ohio that were hanging out, and we went across the street to this barn where his dad's band was playing, like, they were like a 90s cover band, so they played all the Alice in Chains and Soundgarden and Stone Temple Pilots. They were actually pretty good. And at one point, my friend, his name was Nick, he wore a yellow hat. He and some other dude started like getting in each other's face, and next thing you know, like, there's a scuffle, and I see him like punch this guy, and the dude's fucking eyebrow piercing on the other side of his face popped off, and then everything kind of collapsed into this like giant mosh pit, and then out of nowhere, this my buddy's dad. This guy was like a lion of a man, like a good solid, 6.5 feet tall, giant golden mullet. It looks like a lion.
Golden mullet.
Yeah, he like runs in there and like, this big powerful fist goes flying through, and then next thing you know, there's this dude flying over the heads of everyone, and then all hell breaks loose. And I turned to my right, and this chick who was standing next to me, she was like worried about her boyfriend. And I like grabbed her by the waist, the belt, and I was like, "Hold on 1 second." And then I like let go, and she went flying in there, and I didn't mean for that to happen. And then I looked to my left, and then this dude in a polo shirt is come flying at me, and I stepped back and I tripped on something, and I sat down in a chair, and then he punched my friend's little sister.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah. So it was fucked up because he knocked her over a table, and then his little brother ends up flying over the table, all like Spartan, like fucking Brad Pitt and Troy style, like flies over the table and waylays this dude like rabid monkey style. And then their mom's like, "You better get back to the house. They're about to start busting caps." And so I'm like, "Holy shit. This is my first time in Kokomo. This is the craziest shit. What the fuck?" So I like hightail it over there. We all like end up in their house, and people are flying out in their big trucks, and it was incredible. I think it took about a minute, maybe a minute and a half from like and I'm not sure if I'm counting from the moment that I noticed that shit was about to happen or when it actually started, because I might have actually been paying attention to that for longer than I realized. That was like,
well, time slows down too.
2 decades ago, and I have no recollection of what the music sounded like during that brief moment. So yeah, time probably slowed down. The gravity of the situation altered everyone's perception of time.
Because I mean, in your retelling it, all those steps. You're talking about taking individual steps.
Yeah,
those are
my little slices of time.
That's what I'm saying. You're describing like taking steps through the space as individual steps, because then you're like, and then I stumbled backwards, and then I sat down, and it's like these little frames and snippets, but that's because shit is happening so fast
Oh yeah.
that you can only pick out. You're like, what the fuck? This is here and this is there, and then this is why when people have a brawl and they tell their shit, they're like, that was happening? Oh my god. And they like then they start talking about shit that neither one even realized was happening at the same time, because in realizing that you can't take in everything, there's going to be gaps in your shit and then gaps in their shit, and then when you put the information together, then you see something that neither person saw, and then you're like, whoa, that was like this meta level thing going on. And then again, this is why it's really interesting to see how many people are aware of their own existence and stay, you know, aware of their surroundings at the same time.
Man, like I didn't even I must have, I think I stepped on like the front leg of the folding chair and just sat down, and that was just enough that I saw this hand go right over my head. Just and then wham, this girl goes flying. It's like, what the hell?
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Well, because this shit happens.
It probably only took like 15 seconds from the moment that I started like taking steps.
That's, I mean, and again, it only took 15 seconds in the real world, but because your adrenaline, you felt a minute worth of experience in your reality. And this is why adrenaline and plank time are so weird. In the sense of when you're heightened awareness and your brain activity is allowing you to use more seconds than you do, or more of a second than you do normally, then you're actually experiencing more in the same amount of time.
Yeah.
So you are experiencing more time. It's weird. Information is weird. It's very malleable.
I think our brains are also pretty good at identifying when we can just like drop frames. It's like,
right,
none of this is important. Like, there have been plenty of times when I've been driving home and I know nothing happened because I get home and there's nothing wrong with my car.
Mm-hmm.
and you know, I'm in one piece.
Yeah.
And I'm not in the hospital. And I don't have any recollection of the drive.
Yeah, I mean,
because it's not important. It's not something I need to commit to memory.
No, because once you know how to get home, you can just go on autopilot. But that's also why, and when people end up getting in accidents, is often near their home and they're in one of those mindsets.
Yeah,
it's not. It's not an accident. It's
yeah, that's when the cosmos comes and smacks you around. It's like, hey, buddy, pay attention.
Yep, pretty much.
Well, I'm pretty sure most accidents, the bulk of things that happen are like any kind of vehicular failure can generally be attributed to a lack of maintenance. Because if a car is put together properly using, like, you know, the right components, and there's nothing wrong with any of the seals or the rubber jackets or whatever, like, those things there shouldn't be anything wrong with it.
Yeah.
I mean, occasionally you get things like tire failure, but our tires are designed now to let the car just sit down.
Mm-hmm.
And cars are designed to squat down and allow you to have some kind of control, a little bit of control. We've got really, really sophisticated vehicles, and so I'm really, you know, not to say that there are some things that just, you know, some things do just happen. Sometimes things happen. Sometimes some things are manufactured improperly, and you have a dud or a lemon or whatever. Mm-hmm. But the vast majority of things are like, you know, someone just didn't take care of what was going on. They weren't paying attention. They're being careless. I feel like that's the vast majority of like power tool injuries.
Most definitely. I mean, human error is 100% one of the biggest parts of all, you know.
Yeah.
I think whether it be car accidents or heavy machinery or power tools, it's like people getting too lax with their actions and not paying attention as if it's the first day that they learned. Yeah, that's when shit, you know. I remember when I when I first started growing my dreads, I had to start paying attention to where my hair was concerning power tools, because then it's like you don't want to fucking get that shit caught up in a screwdriver, or let alone a fucking saw, or let
Dude,
alone something that's really
no,
fucking.
it's having long hair. Things like cleaning the sink
Oh God, yeah,
or cleaning
yeah,
the toilet.
yeah.
Like that's one of those things where it's like, oh, I gotta like put it in a bun
Yep.
and
Yep.
then.
No, I saw a
Like,
maintenance
you
guy get his
strap
hair
it
on the
all back.
toilet one time, and I
Oh.
was like,
Poor bastard.
he didn't even pay attention to it, and that's why I was just like, that was even more gross. He was used to it, I guess.
Oh
He
man.
he's these, God bless these maintenance guys, and especially in college towns, man, because these fucking undergrads leave them with some shit.
Holy crap. So when the last place I rented, was downtown, and it was this old ass like plantation style house. I'm pretty sure it was always a commercial building, like maybe like a law office or something. But it was a big old building, like 11-foot ceilings and old pipes. And anyways, one of my neighbors apparently didn't realize that these old pipes couldn't handle coffee grounds, and that no pipes are really
Oh
meant for coffee
no.
grounds.
Oh
And so
no.
at one point, I remember I was doing dishes, and the drain was having problems. So I got the sink plunger out, and I started plunging stuff. And next thing I know, there's this black brackish stuff coming out of the sink in my bathroom, and next thing I know, I hear this scream, and my downstairs neighbor, runs out of her place and out of the foyer, and we're all coming down because we heard some screaming, and she's covered in this horrible, foul-smelling nastiness, basically like rotten coffee grounds.
Had come out of the shower.
It busted the pipes in the ceiling
Oh
and
no.
rained down coffee death all over her living room and all over her kitchen, and the place stank. So anyways, they came, and it took them like 2 weeks to fix everything because yeah, the pipes had all like coffeeed up. They coffeed up so bad that they were coming out of. Well, here's the best part. So her kitchen and my bathroom sink shared one pipe network, and my sink and her bathroom sink shared a pipe network, and they were connected through some other like exchange. There was another exchange that they all connected to, so it was all like this really weird. It was never supposed to be a multi-occupant, multi-bathroom dwelling. It was clearly converted in an era when there was no code.
Yeah.
And not just no code, but no.
Most of Bloomington.
Yeah, no code and no inspections, even when the code was emerging. So
that's most of Bloomington, man. That's where you see these bathrooms that have windows
that have so much paint on them that you can't even open the window.
Right.
Yeah.
And then there's no vent.
Yeah.
Because the code just said it had to have a window, not that that window had to be openable.
Yeah. Well, that
is a window or a vent.
That bathroom used to be a closet.
Oh man.
Man, there's so many. That sucks about Bloomington is that I've known so many people that when I meet them when I was a teenager or in college, I would meet them. They'd be living in the dorm, and then a year or two later, they're like, "Oh, I moved into this apartment or I moved into this house," and I want to say more than half selected some house that had a serious mold problem, and they just didn't know. They didn't even know what it smelled like until like 2 months later when they were like real fucking sick. And like I'm like a mold test. I can smell that stuff like from outside the house when there's a strong breeze and I'm upwind. There's just a look. There's even a look to a house that's like infested with mold and all that kind of crap. And so you'd think that there'd be some kind of body to regulate housing like that, so that the house wouldn't represent an
existential threat.
Yeah, like an existential health hazard. I mean, some of these places would probably qualify to be like, toxic.
Oh yeah, most definitely.
Like toxic environments.
Because a lot of them still have the lead paint.
Oh God.
So a lot of the homes still do, which is fucking crazy.
You know, it's funny. You can tell those houses because the way light reflects off of those walls really weirdly. It's like there's something about it that's not. It's not latex.
Yeah. That's insane.
It's also probably because they're brush jobs and not done with rollers or spray. So.
Yeah, that's just how dumb people were. They used to put lead in the walls. We didn't know.
I still think it's funny. I remember hearing stories from like I guess my parents' generation about playing with liquid mercury in bare hands.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
here's a great one actually. So the Haynes manual, Haynes Automotive Manuals. The guy who founded it died recently. Bless his soul, because that man, helped foster a self-maintenance culture for automobiles that lasted, decades. And his son's going to keep going. So that's awesome. It's family business. Anyways, so if you look at really old Haynes manuals from like 20, 30 years ago, they're handling, or maybe just 20 years ago, but they are handling parts and packing grease with bare hands. But if you look at the modern ones, they're wearing gloves. But the compounds they're using are the same.
Oh, God. Oh, Jesus.
So this is one of those things, like, at some point they recognize, hey, guys, this isn't good. Jackie's kid over there has, like, a tail and, like, 6 fingers
Oh, jeez.
on each hand and, like, an extra set of canines on the top.
Man.
It's a good thing that these things actually happen, that we can see them, that there's, like, there may have been actually, I'm willing to believe that era of man, the early era of man, of chemical engineering, they would have hid everything like that.
Mm-hmm.
They would have suppressed it as much as they could.
Yeah. I don't think that's
I think they
an
would still
inaccurate
suppress
observation.
that. I think they would still suppress that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Unless they couldn't. And if they couldn't, they would run with it with the best.
Well, but that's where I think it's hard to tell what's happened today, whether it's been... I think it's more whistleblowers that have gotten us to where we are than anything. It hasn't been because our government's actually forthright with us or actually more transparent. It's that we've had a lot of whistleblowers that, whether it be about the tobacco industry or the WikiLeaks stuff, or Aaron Schwartz, like that dude
whose life was just ruined and he killed himself.
Yeah, because he gave access to information effectively. And that's, again, it's hard to tell if we're here because of people like that who've been the catalyst to get us here, or if there's actually an organic movement of transparency on the government side that's getting us here. I think it's more the former, not the latter, just because if it were the former, or if it were the latter, then Aaron Schwartz wouldn't have had to die to get us here.
I don't think that the government has any interest in being forthright about anything.
No, I don't think they do.
If they, CIA wouldn't exist.
Right.
If they wanted to be transparent.
Yeah.
No intelligence agencies would exist. They would just have bureaus of information.
Yeah. Which maybe we need to shift towards that.
I think
that's
the FBI
kind of
is the only thing that qualifies because they have the word bureau in their name.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, in the sense of when we're talking about a Bureau of Information, if the government has gathered the information as a citizen who they're supposed to be protecting, quote unquote,
so it'd be
I should be able to access the information.
Bureau.
Exactly. That it's not private information; it's public information because they're a public entity. So everyone should have access to. So that's a whole different bureau there, because then we get closer to an objective truth. If we have a bureau that's protecting public information.
Instead of NSA, it would be the Bureau of Information Integrity.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a whole different universe. and a whole different government where the government's protecting the integrity of information everywhere and not just protecting state secrets. Because that's right now it's just about state secrets and protecting what they believe to be state interests, which most of the time aren't actually in line with the interests of the people now because we have a bipolar state.
We need the Bureau of Public Health.
Yeah, right. Like a real one.
Yeah.
Well, or mental health, for that matter. And I mean, other countries have ministries of happiness. We don't.
God, we need a Ministry of Happiness.
We don't. There's multiple countries that have that position. It's not just one. It's multiple countries.
The Ministry of Objective Truth.
Why isn't there government with that?
I think it's too. It sounds like a socialist program.
But who's gonna openly be against objective truth? Who's gonna be that person?
I don't know, but
I'm not for objective truth.
Right.
That sounds crazy.
I don't believe that 2 + 2 can equal 4.
Yeah, I do not believe everyone should have to agree that 2 + 2 = 4. It's un-American. I have the freedom to believe 2 + 2 can equal 3 or 5, whatever.
Or pi.
Or pi, whatever I feel. My opinion usurps reality and objective truth in America. First Amendment.
First Amendment.
Even though that's not what that means, but that's what I believe it means because it's my First Amendment.
Man, the First Amendment, the right to a subjective reality.
Basically.
Oh God, that's terrible. I'm going to assert my First Amendment right to a subjective reality. This is not happening.
And to yell about it. Everyone has to hear my voice about my subjective reality.
Yeah, and they have to accept it.
Yes, exactly. And I don't have to accept theirs.
Yep.
Because that's my First Amendment, not theirs.
That's the right to subjective reality.
I don't have to listen to their First Amendment.
Oh man, in that universe, bear arms are actual arms from a bear. And we wear them like Worf's belt, like his sash.
I like that we can just grab the Constitution.
Oh yeah, keep that handy just for whenever it's necessary. Because sometimes it's nice to be able to just jump to a portion of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Half the time I look at the Constitution on the internet, I feel like I'm looking at, an out of context dissection of a subsection.
Yeah. Amendment 1. Freedom of religion, speech, and the press, rights of assembly and petition. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Nowhere in there is there anything about private organizations or social media. Zero. So, Facebook, nothing to do with First Amendment, people. Stop that. Next time anyone starts talking about Facebook and First Amendment, stop them. Tell them, hey, those two things have nothing to do with each other right now.
Wait, what's freedom of the press? Is that in there?
Yeah, it's abridging the freedom of speech or of the press.
Isn't Facebook a publication platform, a self-publication platform?
But Congress had nothing to do with that.
No, I know, but so
It's not though. It's not. It's not a news platform, because in fact, the fact that they do not have an onus for truth makes them exempt itself, like that specific.
Oh, I'm just
thing.
thinking of the printing press.
I'm saying specifically because Facebook now has asserted that they have no onus for truth on their platform. They are not the press. They are not the press. In fact, they are de facto not the press. So they
Yeah, but
are 100% not.
Sure, but I'm thinking of a press as a much more generalized, like, hey guys, I've got a printing press. Let's print up a bunch of flyers.
But that's
I've got a Xerox machine. Let's
that
print
would
up
be
some punk rock
a
show.
press, not the press.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
This is where every word is important.
Yeah.
When it talks about the press, it's the press in the sense of the specific press. There's not a distinction of a press. If it said a press specifically, it would be any press, any printing press.
Like any publication of any type
publication
would be protected.
Would be. But this is specifically the press.
Yeah.
Which is specifically journalism and news outlets.
Yeah.
Because again, this is
because that's like, kind of foundation level protecting speech.
Yeah.
But
yep. So they weren't trying to protect tabloid speech. In the sense of
that's right.
It's not part of
because libel exists.
Right. Exactly. Slander and libel laws exist, but also protections for satire exist. So, if you are successful at satire while slandering someone, you can be protected by the same law that would have condemned you before if you did not make it satirical.
That's like when Seth MacFarlane makes Peter Griffin call Donald Trump cash poor.
Right.
And then beats him up.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And they have a long fight. They have like a 5-minute fight.
If that were not successful satire, Donald Trump could potentially sue
Seth MacFarlane.
Yeah, and he could potentially win. This is also the core of what some have said is an incorrect judgment about parody in the sense of the Two Live Crew Do Wah Diddy track. It's not technically parodying the audience, it's parodying the song. So this is where, because of the fact that they did parody the song, they won the case. But in the context of the term parody, you're actually technically supposed to be making fun of the audience who or the original consumers of the piece of what you're making fun of, to be technical parody.
That's why Weird Al is successful at parody.
Right.
Because he not only goes to the core of who actually listened to the original music, but he also like channels like whatever is actually active in the culture.
Yeah, so Weird Al is exactly a great example of one who follows the rules of parody as to why he can do what he does and make gangster or Amish paradise and not get sued.
Or white and nerdy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Or that boy band cover bought it on eBay. That's actually I think that's one of the best ones.
I don't remember that.
Oh, he's got. I'll send you a link at some point. We'll have to put a link up in the description, I think, for this one, because it's actually one of the. It's perfect because as far as millennials go, we've all used eBay. We've all been searching on eBay for those things from our childhood, and this is like, I think it's like a 6 or 7-year-old song, but there are aspects to the song itself that are like, holy crap, that exists. I'm gonna go look for it. This guy reminds you of these things. Yeah. But then he lampoons the eBay culture of, snipers and staying up really late and buying useless things that you don't actually need and you don't even collect. So there's like not even a collection to build yet. It's like the beginning of the collection. It started out like as nothing. A lunch tray. Stuff like that. The absurd shit. Things that that shouldn't be on eBay. Things that you shouldn't be. Maybe if it was like a flea market and you're looking at stuff that has a minimum age of 20 years, sure, I expect to see a metal lunchbox.
I mean, but why though? This gets back to the notion of, I think we've passed peak capitalism in the sense of what has happened is that people have not been able to have time to learn skills to be able to produce So then everyone is resigned to being a reseller, and now the most prominent way people see the potential for big value is in some old relic, or something that's like, um, you know, antique from their fucking grandma's toaster or some shit. Like, people think that everything that gets old is all of a sudden valuable.
That's because I think our society has lost the concept and understanding of the concept of kitsch.
I mean, I don't know if it ever understood it.
Oh no, I think they did. I remember seeing books about kitsch.
I mean, there's people who wrote about it, and there's people who theorized about it, but I don't know if our society ever,
was fully aware of it.
Or I don't think it ever embraced it correctly, in the sense of kitsch is not an identity that you can buy.
No, it's not. It's something that kind of emerges over time, like.
But that everything that we do in America tries to take something that's kitsch and resell it as a package, which is why I don't think we've ever done it correctly here. Every time
or maybe it's a continuum.
I mean, I think there's absolutely a continuum of it, but what ends up happening is every time something becomes popular for the sake of itself, then it gets capitalized upon, and then
Beanie
it gets
Babies.
Exactly. What you take your pick. Every time, then it becomes
bobbleheads,
watered down, and then it ruins the kitsch.
Troll dolls.
Whatever. Insert anything. Insert anything. And because of the way this culture, it basically pimps everything out. This is what I've realized, in the sense of.
That's why Taco Bell became really popular for a while in the 90s.
Yeah, yo quiero Taco Bell.
And now they're all like.
Yo quiero Taco Bell.
They're all healthy with their green menu.
I mean, exactly.
Which I feel bad for people who can't eat cilantro, because that stuff is all cilantro.
But again, this is where all, I saw like a vodka that it brands itself as a vodka for dog people.
What?
Exactly. Everything has to virtue signal now. Every organization is virtue signaling because they have to. Gillette made a commercial about toxic masculinity because they had to. You have to do those things as an organization now, or as a corporation, now that they have personhood.
Man, I remember seeing so many like threads about that were just like angry, just completely angry. It just doesn't make any sense. Like, everyone gets bent out of shape about things.
Yeah.
And the weird part is that, like, at that level, of course, like the comment section of a news outlet, or even the comment section of a Facebook post from a news outlet, shared from a news outlet, like, there are no authorities present. Very rarely is there some authority who actually understands what's going on a really granular level, who really understands every aspect of it. Occasionally, I find myself like paying attention to some thread where it's a bunch of martial artists that are dissecting some fight video or some martial arts technique demonstration video. But even then, like, you can kind of tell that everyone's like, it looks like these things, but I'm not there, so I can't really say with certainty. And no one's really going to be like, oh yeah, this is what's going on, except for until you go to like the original post, and then you see some, keyboard ninja who's studied every YouTube video of every martial arts style that you can think of. All 90,000 hours of it. Because they got like 12 monitors.
Right.
And all the Red Bull, because you need all the Red Bull to do that. And cocaine. But nobody has time for that.
Right.
Like.
By then, you're not wanting to look at martial arts videos, right?
Oh my god. The best is when it's some like video from China, and like they're speaking some really hard dialect of Chinese that even the Chinese commenters are like, that's like, I think that's this dialect. I'm not sure what they're actually saying. Whenever I see someone saying that, I think that person's being honest. Because I don't believe anyone can, like, it's like when I see a video of some good old boys taking their mud truck through some, you know, mud pit, and then they get out and they start talking about their truck. Like, you know, I understand that because we live in Indiana, and I've watched enough of these videos that I can kind of start to make sense. But I've also heard some like really deep South dialects that are like, holy shit, that's English.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and sometimes it's like they're talking about barbecue, and it's like, okay, I know they're talking about some ribs because I can see the ribs, and I'm pretty sure he said rub, but I didn't make out any of these other words.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because, you know, I know they're going to turn out some really fantastic barbecue, and I know they're speaking English.
I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to call it English sometimes because it's like, this is where.
Well, it's not Creole.
What? Right? Yeah. I mean, in the sense of, man.
Like there's some like Ozark dialects that are pretty thick.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. Where you can't understand about 40% of what they're saying, and again, that's why I'm like, I don't even know if you can call it English anymore. It's Southern dialect is this whole own thing, man.
And then there's like Texan English, which is definitely its own thing.
Yeah.
Because I think there are several Texan English dialects actually.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Like they've got a whole range of dialects to that state.
Mm-hmm.
Texas is actually kind of an interesting place in that regard. Like I've had barbecue from Central Texas and from Eastern Texas, and they were completely different, even though they were only a few hours apart.
Yeah.
And then I understand the further west you go, like it changes. It changes dramatically, and just within the state of Texas. Whereas within the rest of the United States, you've got to go from like time zones to get big, significant differences in the barbecue.
Well, in most of the different like rest of the country, it's about the sauce.
Yeah,
that's the difference, not the
whether
they're smoking it or you know, grilling. You know, so there's a lot of variation in Texas.
I think all of the cattle country section of the United States, they've all got like their own variations of barbecue. But I think that, I mean, I'm sure they do, but I feel like the only ones that really get any attention are like Kansas City, and it's not even like Kansas City, it's the Missouri Kansas City, and then Texas and like Memphis, and then everything else, like I read about it, but it's like I have to go looking for information. It's not like it's not on the front page of Google.
Well, this is where you gotta talk to black people.
Yeah.
Fucking King Rib up in Indianapolis. Shout out to King Rib, holding it down. I haven't been in probably over a decade, but I know they're probably still out there smoking that shit for fucking 24 hours because that's what they do.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you would roll up on King Rib anytime, and the line would be fucking the line would be long because everybody wants their fucking king ribs.
See, I've been to like barbecue places in Kansas City, Missouri that were like that. Like the line winds through the entire place. Not just that, but the line winds through what amounts to a impulse buy section of sauces and rubs and utensils and gloves and all the things you need to grill on your own, right? And you know, it was pretty good. It was definitely it was the number one rated barbecue place in Missouri. I mean, it was damn good. But that's the thing, is like, you know, you gotta really look for that stuff.
Well, that's what I was about to say. I think the main reason that a lot of people don't, well, if you're from Indianapolis and you like ribs, you know about King Rib. But the reason that it doesn't get national notoriety is because of its location.
Yeah.
Like, or the ones that are in existence are in the hood. So it's like you got to go to fucking 38th and Emerson or fucking Post Road, like 42nd Post Road or some shit like that. And nobody's coming from out of town to go to 42nd Post Road. Like, that shit just ain't happening.
Yeah.
Unless they're coming from Chicago or Gary, and they're not, you know, they're not coming down here for that shit. So, you know, again, it's a matter of people are scared to go to the areas if they're not from those places. So then they just get kind of lost in the fray.
I feel like the best location for a new barbecue restaurant internet, you can have this for free. The best location for a new barbecue restaurant would be a closed down supermarket
Yeah.
because it already has a meat processing deli area. It already has all the kitchen necessary, and then it has all that floor space for picnic tables. And every like 2 picnic tables, you space it out with like a barrel to throw stuff away, and you got loading docks,
Marsh,
and like
really.
giant coolers to keep all your stuff fresh that you need, and then you got a place to there's a lot of staging area in a place like that, and most of them still have, or if they had a deli, they also have a coffee island. There's a huge potential for a closed down supermarket like those Marshes.
They'd have to sell a lot of ribs though.
I mean, we're talking about like,
Sell a lot of ribs. We're talking about like Caesar's Palace of ribs here. right. I mean, but that's where I'm like, that's something where those. So I went to a place like that in Texas. I mean, it wasn't in an old.
Was it the Stockade?
Maybe.
Is it like a big open air thing? And
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like the
I forget.
Stockade.
It was like 40 minutes outside of Austin.
Okay.
I forget the name of it, but the parking lot was packed. It was the only destination for miles around, so people came there specifically for the ribs.
Yeah.
And then, like you're saying, it was open air.
It was a big destination type thing.
And then there was closed seating in a couple different spots. They had like
gift shop type thing.
gift shop. They had like a concert area where it was like
It was like an old
beer garden type.
it was probably created out of like the remnants of an old western town, right? Something
Well,
like that.
it felt like an old ranch.
Oh, cool.
It felt like it was an old, like somebody had converted a ranch.
That's
that was a real
big-ass
big,
ranch.
a big ass ranch, not a little one. A big ass ranch had been converted into this
Yeah.
place. Is what it felt like.
That's awesome.
Because then it was totally Texas. It was fucking 100% Texas. Even down to the wooden fence around the, where you drive through, and it's, again, it's like you drive through and you turn onto the dirt road, or once you go into the place, you're like on all dirt and shit, and it's like,
And then as you approach, like you realize just how big it actually is.
Right, yeah. It's a very big place.
That's what I love about Texas, is that the times that I've been there, every time I've gone someplace, you can see it like as you approach, and then you approach it for a while, and you keep approaching, and it's like, holy crap, this thing's huge. Like, but not everything's bigger in Texas. I remember when I visited a buddy of mine, we would go to like Six Flags, and I remember getting like a tall drink, and it wasn't very big. It was like kind of disappointingly small. I was like, man, not everything's bigger in Texas, is it? He's like, no, well, we're at like Six Flags, so what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
That was back when I could ride roller coasters without fear of like regretting it the next day. Now when I think about a roller coaster, all I can think is like, oh man, that's gonna be like 3 or 4 days of recovery, just being shaken around like that.
Yeah. It gets back to the whole. If that shit hurts. Yeah, you're not crashing in the Iron Man suit. And
Hell
fucking
no.
This shit hurts to go on a roller coaster, man. It really does.
It
really
does,
does.
man.
Fucking beast on the old rickety
Dude,
wooden shit.
Any of those wooden roller coasters, they are like, you're just asking for it.
Mm-hmm.
They just shake the shit out of you. Even some of the new like metal roller coasters, I feel like there's just no accounting for the way the Earth will actually settle. No amount of engineering will actually account for what's going on underneath. And so one of those pylons settles like 1 millimeter last year more than they expected it to, and now there's a little like spot that everyone feels every time the car goes over. It's something like that probably happens. And then, but it's not just one; it's like several of them. So the thing gets all thrown off. Next thing you know, it's has all sorts of bumps everywhere because it's actually kind of twisted, and they can only make those things so strong too. Because if they make them too strong, they don't flex in the wind or whenever geological activity happens.
There are some crazy feats of engineering, but I'm also cool on it. I don't have no interest in. I'd rather go I feel like it'd be safer to go to space than ride a roller coaster anymore.
Oh well,
You know?
whenever they have those like towers where people ride up them and drop, and you read about someone getting their feet cut off, or like fucking every so often the restraints fail when they're going through a fucking loop and someone falls out of a roller coaster, or the roller coaster just flat out fails and the car goes flying off into a tree or some shit.
I realized one of the reasons we stopped going, or one of the reasons I personally stopped going, is because one of the summers I went is some of that shit happened at Kentucky Kingdom. The summer
fucking car gets stuck upside down mid loop, and it's like,
I think it was like a month after we had gone, where the fucking lap restraint came loose on the descent. So somebody flew out of their fucking shit and fell 40 feet and died, and I was like, huh, that could have been us. Because it was on one of those rides. One of the rides we went on like 3 or 4 times, because one of the reasons that Kentucky Kingdom was cool is that they didn't have long lines at the time.
Yeah, because they had lax safety.
Yeah, now we know.
Well, hopefully they've gotten their shit together.
Oh, I'm sure. They're still
business,
around, yeah.
So.
There's no way they're still out killing kids.
Oh, man.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously this shit doesn't happen nearly as often as people would expect that.
Yeah.
But like I said, I've jumped out of a plane at this point. I'd rather, I feel safer jumping out of a plane than going on a roller coaster.
Yeah. I know that shit happens on roller coasters because there are videos of that shit happening to roller coasters. Like actual videos on the internet circulating of horrible shit happening to people because of mechanical failure. And then that just makes me think, like, shit, why couldn't their maintenance guys have actually looked at everything like they're supposed to? I know it's probably one person had one day where they didn't look.
Yep.
But that's all it takes.
That's all it takes.
And like OSHA exists, but they can't be everywhere.
I mean, but this is also why I think you have the big Kings Islands and Six Flags that persist, and you don't have little parks.
Yeah.
Because the other ones couldn't.
They just can't afford it.
Yeah.
Well, it's always.
I mean, think about the Disney staff. And they don't have big rides.
They don't even pay those people very well.
But it's like its own country.
Yeah.
It's like its own country.
It's always made me wonder how groups like Indiana Beach or the Holiday World can even survive.
I mean, have you seen the facilities there? I mean,
Indiana Beach looks like a giant wading pool
did they even,
with a playground.
Are they still open even?
I don't even know if
I think they
may have closed. I know that
one of them did close.
I know Holiday World is still open, so
yeah, they must be Indiana Beach that closed.
Yeah, I mean, I still see little, $5 off coupons at like Taco Bell or KFC to go to Holiday World. The water rides are actually good. I feel like water rides are the least jarring physically. Yeah. And there's like that whole, like, you get wet, you get back in line, you cool off while drying off, and then you go get back in some water, get splashed. I think that's actually like a reasonable. The world needs more water parks, but less pee though.
Yeah. Right.
There's no amount of filtration or chlorine or whatever they put in to neutralize that shit.
Yeah. It should sting you if you piss. I would be fine with that. I'd be totally fine with that.
Yeah.
If they could figure out some shit that made it painful for people to piss in the water, and it wasn't permanent, but just as long, if you pissed in that water, you're fucking gonna burn.
There's a way to do this.
I'd be totally fine with that.
So Holiday World gives out free soda and free sunscreen.
Oh,
free soda and free sunscreen.
Yeah.
And you make it so if the soda and the sunscreen react, it makes a slight tingling sensation.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
And you make it so that soda contains enough of the compound that you definitely don't want to mix them together because it'll like explode in your face. Like it'd be like a Mento of reactivity. But when you piss it out, if it comes in contact with the sunscreen, there's plenty of sunscreen in the water because it's rinsing it off of everyone everywhere they go. Yeah, there we go. You guys at Holiday World can have that one. We just want to be able to go there for free now.
Then kids start getting chemical burns and shit.
Oh, no.
That's what you get for pissing in the pool.
Yeah. seriously, it's not like amusement parks don't have restrooms everywhere, especially
Right,
water parks.
yeah.
Water parks have restrooms every like 20 feet because everyone's dripping wet, and that's like, wet hands and a breeze. That's all it
Right,
takes.
yeah. Catalyst. Most definitely.